Good morning and welcome, biology, to kind of the first video series here. We're going to do chapter 1 today. I have it broke down by sections, so chapters 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. You'll see them as we go through them. Biology is the study of life. I'm really excited to teach it this year. So let's jump right in. We're going to talk about kind of all this kind of stuff this year. We're going to talk about human anatomy and the different types of organisms. We're going to use microscopes to look at things, talk about DNA, do all that good stuff. But first, what is biology? Fundamentally, biology is the study of life. It offers us an organized framework. It allows us to ask questions about the natural world, to figure things out about the natural world that in a kind of scientific way. We can look at really, really tiny organisms like these bacteria here, which each one of these things is you can't see with the naked eye. You have to use a microscope. To the largest animal to ever lived, the blue whale. And there's this little human size here for kind of a comparison. And an adult man can stand inside of a blue whale's heart. They're very big. So how is it that we can take something and study these guys, but also study all the way up to here? So that's what this class is going to go through. That's what we're going to talk about, is how we study living organisms and how we do the science behind that. So to start off, we're going to talk about what makes something alive. If we're going to study life, we have to know what makes something alive. And there's 7 unique characteristics that all living things share. They all have organization, the presence of cells, respond to stimuli, they maintain homeostasis, they have some kind of metabolism, they grow and reproduce over time, and they change over time. We're going to go through each of these, but this is just a really good list to have that gives you all 7 of them. I bet you it's going to be on a quiz somewhere. All right. For organization, organization is a high degree of order within an organism. It includes its external and internal parts and how it uses those parts to interact with the world. So these owls here, very organized. You can tell that they all look like owls. They all look a little bit different, but you can see that they have the big eyes, the round faces. Most of them have some kind of ears. Now, owls are obviously alive. They move, they breathe, they do all this thing. But rocks are also organized. Last year we talked in neuroscience about rocks. Rocks have shape. Like there's lots of different shapes of quartzes, but there's not a lot of consistency between them. There's big ones, small ones. They get bigger to just depend on how old they are. The cool thing about living organisms is when you're looking at a specific type of living organism, whether it's an owl, whether it's a lizard, whether it's a fish, a plant, a fungus, they're all going to look the same way if they're related and behave the same way. The second thing is all living organisms have cells. The cell is the smallest unit of life that's still able to do all the things that make something alive. So bacteria, they're one cell, but they're still alive. And in fact, any organism that has one cell is called unicellular. But they still produce energy. They still have the ability to get rid of wastes, to kind of change their environment, to grow and reproduce and make more of themselves. But they are just one tiny thing. On the other hand, you can be multicellular, which is any organism that has more than one cell. And the nice thing about being multicellular is you get more complexity. Your cells start to what we call differentiate. So in humans, we have these stem cells that become muscle cells, blood cells, nerve cells, cardiac muscle cells, liver cells, and intestinal cells. And so they all have these different jobs now. So they've differentiated. So these are organisms like trees and fish and humans and mushrooms, which are a fungus, and plants, and all of those good things. All right, so when you get to multicellularity, you have to have a little bit more organization. And we're going to start from the really, really big thing, which is an organism, and we're going to work our way backwards. So an organism is the creature you're looking at. And if it's multicellular, it probably has some organ systems. And organ systems are groups of specialized parts that carry out a certain function. So an example for us would be the nervous system, which is the brain, the sensory nerves, and the sense organs, the eyes, the ears, the tongue, all of them working together to respond to your surroundings. So it's the whole system as a whole. If we break that down even smaller, we get to organs, which are structures inside an organ system that have a specific job. So, for example, that owl has an ear that allows it to hear. We have ears that's a specific organ. Think of the eye as an organ. You could think of the stomach as an organ. The stomach is part of the digestive system, not the nervous system, but they're all just these one chunk of these systems. And then smaller than organs, all organs are made up of tissues. And tissues are a whole bunch of cells that all have the same ability. So you have tons of nerves that go to your ear that allow you to hear different frequencies, different pitches. They allow you to detect lots of different sounds, like quiet sounds, loud sounds, etc. Going smaller, all tissues are made up of individual cells. And to be a cell, you have to have the membrane covered, contain all the genetic information for replication, and be able to carry out cellular function. So example, one nerve cell. And we're going to talk about in a future chapter cells and their structures and their processes that they do. Inside of cells, there's even smaller structures we call organelles, which are they're smaller than cells, and they carry out things inside of the cell to help the cell survive. So things like the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. It makes the energy for the cell. And these structures contain biological molecules which are even smaller than organelles, and these are the compounds that allow for cellular functioning. Things like proteins and sugars and lipids and fats and nucleic acids, which we're going to talk about and differentiate between. And then the smallest that you can get here is atoms, which they're the smallest part. They're a single element. They build together to make molecules, but we can talk about them because they are important. Iron is used in hemoglobin. It helps to carry oxygen throughout in your blood. So when you go to give blood and you don't have a high enough iron level, this is why they don't let you give blood, because you wouldn't have enough capability to carry oxygen if you gave up a pint of blood. So that's why they test your iron. All right, the third thing that all living organisms do is they respond to stimuli. And a stimulus is a physical or chemical change in the internal or external environment of an organism. So an example is for when you walk outside and it's really sunny, or if you're watching a movie and all of a sudden the lights get turned on, your pupils dilate. They get really small, those black parts of your eye. And this helps to keep the light level of light entering your eye constant, and also helps to not accidentally like blow out your eyeball with too much light and make you blind, which is really nice. All organisms respond to stimuli to stay alive. You can think of 3 examples and write them down if you want, but kind of the ones that I'm going to give are for human-based. When you guys are smelling like really good food, your stomach starts to gurgle and you start to produce more stomach acid. That's you responding to a stimulus. You're getting ready to eat. You know you need something. If you're growing a plant at home and you notice it starts to like bend towards the window, that's because it's following the light. That light is a stimulus for that plant. If you were to twist that plant around and now it's facing away, it eventually will start to grow back facing the light. And then a final one is I'm going to use a dog whistle. A dog whistle is not a stimulus for us. We can't hear it. We can't understand. We don't understand. We can't pick up that frequency. But for dogs, that is a frequency that they pick up and resonate with and come to. So even though it's a stimulus for them, it's not a stimulus for us. So stimulus, think of your senses: hearing, smelling, seeing, tasting. Those are all stimuluses that happen to you in your daily life. All right, the fourth thing that all living things do is they maintain homeostasis. And homeostasis is keeping your internal condition constant, even though you're going through a changing environment. As we go throughout the year, we will go from hot weather to cool weather to cold weather, and we are able to survive in those for a short amount of time, even without like protective clothing or other stuff going on there. And that's because your body is able to sweat to cool itself down. You're able to shiver to warm yourself up. Homeostasis is this ability for you to regulate not just temperature, but things like water content, the uptake of nutrients, making sure that you have enough blood sugar. When you start to get low blood sugar, you start to get hungry and you start to get, a lot of people get grumpy because like, I need to go get food right now. That's just your body saying, hey, we acknowledge that we're not there yet. We need to go. So think of homeostasis as like this Goldilocks effect where your body's keeping itself not too hot, not too cold, but just right. Same thing with like salt, not too much salt, not too little salt, but just right. Your body likes to maintain that nice, happy medium. All right, the fifth thing that all living things do is they have metabolism. Metabolism is the sum of the chemical reactions, and you'll see me abbreviate reaction, RXN, that they take in, and then we transform those things that we take in into energy. So when you eat food, fats, carbohydrates, other things, you're making this ATP, which is this golden molecule we're going to talk about that you use for energy, and you release wastes of carbon dioxide and water. But you create this energy that you're able to use to fuel your body. It's what actually is for us mammals. It's what heats us. This creation of energy is what heats our muscle tissues and allows us to stay warm. For plants, algae, bacteria, they're going to use the sun. That's their energy intake. They're going to generate sugar molecules that they can then use later. They also use the sugar, but they don't use as much of it. And then we like to eat the plants and other animals to capture that energy and use it for our metabolism. The sixth thing that all living organisms do is they grow and develop. So all living things grow and increase in size. So why aren't things like crystals and icicles alive? Because they grow, they get bigger. But what they do is they accumulate the same amount of stuff. The more water that freezes on there, the bigger the icicle. That's like this example here of growth. But not only do we grow, but we also develop. So we don't just get bigger, we develop, we get more muscles, we get more ability, you get taller, your bones grow, etc., etc. We'll talk about this in a couple different ways. Cell division is the division of one cell to make two new cells. All organisms start out as one cell originally, and then you quickly divide and become millions and millions of cells. And then cell development is different from this growth. Instead of this cell, growing and becoming bigger, now it has these new features that we have on these little colored dots here that it's able to do. It has new proteins and new ability to do new work. So, cells will develop, organisms will develop, but what usually happens is your cells divide, then they differentiate, they get their special job, and then they specialize. So it might become a nerve cell, and then that nerve cell might be specially formatted for memory alone. Like that's its job, is to have your long-term memory. All right, the seventh thing that all living things do is they reproduce. And they reproduce organisms like themselves. Now, not every single individual is going to reproduce in a population, and that's okay. That's fine. Not every single individual has to reproduce for a population to continue. Not every single dog out there has to have puppies for us to continue to have dogs. We just need to continue to have enough dogs born each year to continue to have them. In reproduction, organisms are going to transmit hereditary information to their offspring, so that goes from parent to child. And this genetics is encoded in a molecule that we call DNA, and DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. And in a consequent chapter, we're going to talk about the structure of DNA, and we're going to talk about why it's so good at doing what it does. A short chunk of DNA that has instructions for a single trait, let's say eye color, is called a gene. And we're going to talk about, when we talk about genetics, we'll talk a lot about genes and how they're passed from parent to offspring. All right, there are two kinds of reproduction. There's sexual reproduction, which requires two organisms, and the hereditary information is recombined from both organisms. This is like frogs, humans, dogs, most of your vertebrates are this way. The nice thing about sexual reproduction is it gives you opportunity to make new genes, where the opposite, which is asexual reproduction, is one organism and the hereditary information is not recombined. So the original organism and the new one are identical copies. So strawberries will do this. They will bud. If you get one strawberry plant, it will quickly become many strawberry plants. Aspen trees will do this. They will have new organisms, new trees grow up from the roots. These are all, bacteria will do this. These are all copies of the organism and not brand new genetically. They are the exact same DNA. And the seventh thing that all living things do is they change through time. So individuals experience much change throughout their life, but their basic genetic characteristics do not change. So this frog here, from this egg to tadpole with some legs to young frog to adult frog, is the same organism. If you just take one of these eggs and go through, it's the same organism. It has the same DNA the whole way. How it uses that DNA changes. Now it looks a lot different in each stage of its life, but it's just using the same DNA throughout the entire process. But all things change through time, and they change as a population. So whales, the theory behind whales is that they originally were this kind of like shrew-looking guy that slowly started to shrink his legs down to flippers, and then lost the back ones and had these front ones, and then became the whales that we see today. And when we talk about evolution, we will talk about more on this process and how we think that this happened. But these are things that happen over a long, long time. They're not things that happen very quickly, usually. Okay, this is the end of 1.1. So hope you enjoyed this. We're going to talk about 1.2 next, which is diversity.